So it's a great privilege and pleasure to have the opportunity to talk a little bit with our honorees tonight. I will start with you, Wendy. You came here to Berkeley and to iHouse in 1978 from Northampton, Massachusetts, as I know.
From Florida.
From Florida.
Yeah, I had moved.
Okay, but from the East Coast.
Yes. Keep going. I'll help you.
I need some help, clearly. So you moved into iHouse, and we'd love to hear a little bit about how your experience here in iHouse helped shape your sense of the international connectedness of the world and how it opened up various parts of the world to you.
Well, it was incredibly dynamic for me. I grew up in New Jersey. Yes, I was in Northampton at Smith when I was in college for most of my college career. But I grew up in a family that did not travel. I grew up in a family where everybody related to me lived within about 40 minutes drive. And we didn't travel. That wasn't done then the way it is now. Obviously, we didn't have any internet or any way to connect beyond the telephone or writing letters. There were students in high school who went on, foreign trips or exchange student things, but that was pretty rare. And so as a result, I think I grew up in a world that was pretty small and where there was this concept of foreigners. And it's really funny to me now because I think, what the heck did that mean? Who's a foreigner anywhere anymore? Since arriving in International House and having my first exposure to the international community, it's become a very normative thing. Many things that we used to do in the 1970s and 80s have been completely changed, as you know, since I left iHouse and Eric left iHouse and the networking world began. Perhaps some of you remember the first cellular telephone. It was the size of a shoebox in 1989. I mean, really, and it was just a telephone. So I think so many boundaries have changed and so many relationships have changed. My children don't perceive the national boundaries that we do. Facebook and the internet have completely opened their world. And so in that way, I think, especially watching that film earlier tonight, iHouse was so ahead of its time. And I'm really proud to be part of that tradition. It certainly changed my life and made my outlook today that works in international philanthropy a normative one, not something exceptional.
Oh, that's terrific. So Ashok. Yeah. Ashok, you came here from India, possibly from Kanpur. Okay, just checking. Ashok had done his undergraduate work, in fact, in Mumbai, starting in the same college where my wife, Professor Buckley, went to Kanpur, and then came to Berkeley and came into iHouse. I'd love to hear about your experience of how iHouse was both a welcoming experience, coming from the other side of the globe, but also opened up new worlds for you.
Truly, coming to iHouse changed my life in a way that's hard to imagine in any other way, doing how it would have been. The counterfactual is hard to imagine. But I do know that some of the students from India whom I traveled with chose to live in apartments with other Indian students and met the rest of the world only in classrooms, maybe. In contrast, I came here in iHouse and it truly opened the windows and doors to the world that I just hadn't imagined in ways that, let me give a couple of examples. Back in 73, before I came here, the Vietnam War was winding down. America was not seen particularly as a friendly country to people in Vietnam, for example, in terms of what was going on. And coming here, I found that American students, on the other hand, were as open as anybody else I could have imagined on the planet. We went on a retreat with iHouse, other iHouse residents in the Sierras, in the Sierra foothills. And here are American students singing anti-war songs. I mean, it's like, what is going on? You know, something that I couldn't believe my ears. There was one shining example of saying how democratically open the place is and how people carry their own views, indeed. The second example I still bear with me, carry with me, is the experience of incredible generosity of American people. Coming from India, there is no comparable tradition of public giving. If people give money, they give it to their own children, or maybe to their own grandchildren. And maybe they build temples. But to do philanthropic giving in a sense that's in the public interest, that's in the broader improvement of those who are less lucky than us, is just not done in India. And coming here, on the other hand, the openness of heart and the broadness of mind, the public spiritedness of even students along with me in our house, American students, was something I had to see to believe. I wouldn't have believed it sitting in India if I had read about it.
Thanks. So, Wendy, back to you. You came here first to study sociology and then did a degree in journalism. And now, of course, your name is associated with sustainability efforts in all kinds of areas. And we heard about just some of your extraordinary contributions this evening. But could you tell us a little bit about how you made the move from sociology to journalism to interests and commitments to the question of sustainability?
Well, it's jumping back a bit, but I'm kind of a generalist. Eric will say I'm kind of an aggregator of information. After college, I worked as a journalist for a year at I was a general assignment reporter at a newspaper in Florida. And I came to Berkeley to do a graduate degree in sociology. I thought I was going to be a professor. And after a year in the program here, I kind of had this aha moment where I realized I was not going to move to the Midwest to teach sociology. I didn't want to talk about Marxist labor theory anymore, ever. And I thought, what do I really want to do? I've got this fellowship. I was so lucky I got a fellowship. I write well. I'll try to see if the journalism school will take me. So that's what I did, and I ended up there. When I came out of journalism school, and I'd been a stringer for the Chronicle, woken up in the middle of the night when there was a sit-in at the theological seminary, run down, what's going on? No, that wasn't my lifestyle. And so we were in a recession. I needed to work. I ended up working as a marketing communications person in Silicon Valley because they paid more. And I had edited Eric's thesis on networking, oddly enough, which turned out to be kind of an important thing. I didn't know anything about it. I just made it sound better. And we were married then, so I was just doing my thing. Anyway, so I got into that, got into working at Sun Microsystems after that, in marketing communications, had my children, ended up in design school because I wanted to decorate my house, so I didn't want to call my parents up. So I ran a design firm for 16 years, and then Google came into our lives, and suddenly there was an awful lot of money. And I was involved in the environmental movement at that point. NRDC had drafted me onto their board, and I spent all my time at their board meetings just learning. And as our foundation has grown, it's been about 7 years, it's really been an aggregation of things, and realizing how lucky I am to learn from people's books I used to read. I meet the people now. Bill McDonough and Michael Pollan here at Berkeley, and people who have influenced the way that we think about reshaping the world. This is what I love about what Ashok is doing. We have an opportunity right now to remake the world. We have to think about our energy use, our resource use very differently than we did hundreds of years ago, because there's more of us, everything's going to run out, and we're part of a system. And that's the key idea about networking. We're all networked. You all have a cell phone here tonight, probably. Everybody's on the internet. We experience it every single day. And I would argue that in the next generation, we have to recognize the natural world is networked exactly the same way. I think I said to you tonight, if you lose your cell phone, how do you feel? You've lost your arm. But that's what happens. When we have an oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, we've disrupted an entire networked system. When we exploit the oceans, when we change the chemistry of the air, the water, the land, we're tampering with something we really depend upon for our survival in the future, because the Earth doesn't need us, we need the Earth.
So Ashok, you came here initially having studied physics, and you have gone on to do some of the things, done lots of things, but some of the things that we saw this evening in such a powerful way, bringing the capacity to have a portable stove that can be self-sustaining, at least to the extent that helps the condition of women in Darfur, helping with questions having to do with availability of drinkable, potable water. You're also confronting some of the same issues of connectedness, and yet the problems of sustainability. Water, we all know this in California, but you know it in India, you know it all over the world. Could you say something, building on what Wendy said, about the importance of thinking about our international connections, since iHouse is all about international connections, to the kind of project that you've made your life work directed towards?
Sure. So building on the points you made, I would actually say you perhaps understated the case. It's not only possible to do great things and change the paradigm by which we have been running the planet for the last several centuries. It's essential to do so. You correctly pointed out, Wendy, that the Earth doesn't need us. We need the Earth. In business terms, you could say we are a wholly owned subsidiary of the environment. So if we bankrupt the environment, there we go down the tubes, right? At some level, it's strange that on the one hand, our scientific knowledge doubles every about 2 years now. The rate of doubling has speeded up. Used to be about 10 years. Before that, it was about 30 years, and now it's about 2 years. So we understand a lot, and a lot of the knowledge that is available to us at our fingertips sitting in the evening on the sofa at home. In the past, you would have to run to the library and Xerox pages and pages and figure out what the authors were pulling together. So knowledge has increased, our understanding of the crisis that faces us has increased, and in some sense, the imperative to act and the urgency to act has also increased in a way that's perhaps underplayed in the public consciousness very seriously. We are a single planet. If we don't figure out how to make it sustainable, we are all toast together. Okay?
In a way, realizing that we are a single planet is something that we are all coming to terms with, because climate change seems an inescapable reality, despite the residual doubts of some. But it's precisely that sense of connectedness and that sense of interrelationships that seems to have begun right here in iHouse in very important ways for so many people here and so many people that are part of our lives. And of course, we did mention that other forms of interconnection here began as well. 1,000 marriages? Extraordinary. But before we leave the stage, just a few more thoughts about international interconnectedness and how we have to think about our future together.
Well, I think traditionally, or at least in the last century, let's say, again, because there were foreigners, right? There were, in my mother's generation, there were problems you didn't have to deal with because they were over there. They were in Africa somewhere, God knows. It's just really sad, but what we understand today is that we are all part of a living system, right? And it matters. When you think about emissions, for example, carbon emissions, and people talk about this with respect to climate change, which I say is a consequence of many other decisions that we make, right? We make decisions every day all over the world about how we consume things, what we do with our waste, how we manage our water resources and other resources, how we vote, and how we invest our money. There are people today investing in 200-year-old technologies. I don't do that in Silicon Valley. I invest in the next thing because I really believe, again, the students here at iHouse, students all over the world, have an extraordinary opportunity now to remake the world, to rethink the way we do everything. There is a fellowship program. Berkeley is a partner in the Schmidt MacArthur Fellowship Program, which is taking graduate students who apply for this fellowship and mentors who are professors to work on a project that is going to be transformative, that is going to rethink the way we use resources, thinking about, rather than wasting things as we used to do in the first industrial revolution, we can make things in a way that reuses resources. We're going to make more money if we do that, and we're going to be much kinder to the planet. So I feel very optimistic that we're on the threshold of something important. The political world is not going to follow as quickly, but it didn't follow as quickly with what happened in Silicon Valley either. The transformation comes in the marketplace, and it's really important for everybody here and for the student communities to pay attention to what are those opportunities. There's a next technical revolution coming, and students should be part of it. It's not going to be my generation, it's going to be the next one.
Ashok, a few more thoughts on...
So, I would like to add, I mean, I completely agree with what you said, Wendy. I would like to add a couple of things. One is, while the problems of sustainability may seem to be based on carbon concentrations or greenhouse gas agents and so on, the solutions are not purely technical. It's key to understand that solutions have to take into account the complexity of the real world, which means that science and engineering and technological innovation must work with business, with anthropology, with sociology, with what makes people tick, with behavioral economics. So in some sense, vastly more complex problems that we face today, and you young people will face as you get to middle ages, will require interdisciplinary integration of the kind that was not practiced decades ago. It's not even practiced today enough, I would say. So that's one thought to leave you with. And the second one, I would say, is something I began to realize only after I left iHouse. And that is the value of the international experience of having lived here. You know, when I lived here, I was a physics graduate student doing very hard coursework and hitting the books, and not paying enough attention to the value that iHouse offered in terms of networks and leadership outside of my field. And of course, there were networks and that did happen by happenstance. But I would really, really urge you guys, if you are going to be the leaders that tackle this century's problems, to really work across boundaries, to strengthen your networks, so that you are able to figure out what it takes to solve the problem that's unprecedented challenge to modern society, the threat of climate.
So International House really is a jewel in the crown of the University of California at Berkeley. And you've heard two shining examples of how this institution, this place, has been so important in the lives of two people we celebrate tonight. Please join me in thanking and celebrating the work of Wendy Schmidt and Ashok Gadgil. Thank you so much.